Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the Joey Moments podcast. My name is Joey. I have Joey Moments. And I'm joined today by me, myself, and I. If you're watching the video version of this podcast, it looks a little different. If you're listening to the audio version, it might sound a little different too. There's some differences in the setup today, as this is just me. It's just Joey, no one else, no guests. No friends, nothing today. It was just some scheduling issues, and I decided it'd probably be a little easier to do a podcast by myself than to try and delay the podcast. I didn't know there were going to be as many scheduling issues as there were. Otherwise, we probably would have filmed earlier in the week. And that's okay. I'm not super worried about it. In fact, I'm okay with it. This is, we've had 4 really good episodes that I've enjoyed so far, and today is really just kind of setting the updates for the future and going over my thoughts about the podcast so far and being kind of transparent about how this process has worked so far and how much I've enjoyed it. First and foremost, I do want to thank everyone who has listened from week to week. The viewership has been much more consistent than I really thought it would be. Doing a podcast is not something that is, that is easy. That maybe sounds a little bit better now. It's not something that's easy, and it's not something that you can really just do. There was a lot of setup to get the podcast going, and I started about a month and a half before it went live. So our launch date was the 10th of June, and I say we, there were not a lot of people involved getting this thing going. Tarek was gracious enough to give me insight and a view into his expertise when necessary, but largely this was a solo show. Largely it was me getting everything set up in the background and wanting to put out something that I thought I would enjoy. I wanted to listen to my friends talk. One of the things that we do all the time is we sit in Discord and we play video games together. And when we do that, the fun part about that isn't necessarily the games that we play. Those are fun. But the thing that makes them the most enjoyable is the conversations that happen while we're playing them. Otherwise, it's just a lonely experience, right? So having my friends and the conversations is something that I've always thought was fun, funny, and entertaining. We have a slew of clips that are very entertaining. Moments that have been comedic or have just been, outright enjoyable to watch. And part of the reason for creating the podcast was to try and capture some of that magic from week to week and to be able to put that on the internet and to let people enjoy it as much as I enjoy it. And that was the premise of creating the podcast entirely, was to have an excuse to sit down with one of my friends every week, drink a couple drinks, have a conversation, and to, reflect on our friendship and some of the moments that we've had together. I think the other part of it that makes it so special to me is that these are not always people that I have one-on-one conversations with all the time. Mac was a perfect example last week of someone who I don't individually have a one-on-one conversation with very often. It's not to say that it doesn't happen, but when me and Mac talk, usually we're in a group setting and we're having a discussion with other people involved. It's not always just me and Mac. So it was nice to sit down with Mac and have a really long conversation. And every week is like that, being able to have someone on and have a discussion and a one-on-one. Even Tarek, who was on week 1, is someone that I don't necessarily have one-on-one conversations with all the time. They happen more frequently than Mac, and that's just the nature that me and Tarek hang out a little bit more, and that's just a difference in life circumstance. And it's something that, even though we do have one-on-one conversations somewhat frequently, being able to sit down with Tarek was very enjoyable for me. Z and JC the same way. This is really a reflection on the first 4 episodes and seeing where we're at and where I want to go with it. And of course, we've told, stories ranging from childhood to, stories that happened somewhat recently. And it's been an amazing process, and the support has been amazing. And this week, with there not being the open scheduling for me to get someone on, I wanted to reflect on that. And so reflecting on that, I've thought about, the identity of the podcast. And that is something that a lot of people typically are able to figure out by recording a lot of podcasts before they even put the first one out. If you listen to a lot of podcasts, or you've listened to a podcast from a major production studio or production group, obviously I think me and Tarek talked about, I listened to a lot of Rooster Teeth podcasts back in the day. They would record anywhere from 5 to sometimes, more than 25 test episodes to figure out the identity of the podcast before it goes out. We didn't do that. The first episode we recorded was the episode with Tarek. I did some test footage beforehand to make sure that lighting worked, the camera was fine, all of that stuff. But the first episode is the first take. We didn't record multiple shoots of it. We sat down, we recorded it, and that was it. And it went out. And I put it together, and it was out on Tuesday. Our audio was Monday, video was Tuesday. Finding the identity of the podcast has been a little tricky. We're only 4 episodes in. 5, including this one, and this one I don't think would help with the identity of the podcast. But for me to try and figure that out, I've tried to listen to them and figure out which conversations have been the most meaningful, have been the most entertaining. And sure, the stories of me getting drunk are funny. I think they are. Otherwise, if I didn't have fun doing that, it wouldn't happen. Those scenarios wouldn't come to light. Those stories would never happen if I didn't enjoy, getting there. And part of that for me is that it's fun to be like that sometimes. And, I want to preface that we're not always like drunk or something, that's not, me and my friends, that's not a common thing. And there are stories that have happened, we've been drinking for 3 years, at least I have. I only turned 21 3 years ago. So some people in our group are a little bit older, so they've drank a little bit longer, but it's one of those things that we have 3 years worth of stories. It's happened, there have been weekends and we've gotten drunk on weekends, but it doesn't happen all the time, especially not now. The last time that happened was Memorial Day. We talked about that with JC. But talking about those stories all the time is not something that I think is particularly entertaining. I think they're entertaining stories when they happen. And then after that, sometimes you can reflect on them and you can go, oh, those are funny. And those are the stories we try to tell. The thing that is the most interesting after having Mac on last week was the conversation itself as a whole was so much more than just telling really funny stories. And I think going forward, that is more of what you should expect, is going to be some deeper conversation about our lives. And the thing that I hope you take away from all of this when you listen to Joey Moments is that what you're listening to is a conversation between 2 really close friends. These are my closest friends in the world. These are my second family. Every week I have someone on who I consider just as important to me as my flesh and blood. So it's very fun to have these people on, and I think you should expect more, not serious conversations, right? But more meaningful, emotional-based conversations. And that's what I hope Joey Moments becomes. And that's not to say that I don't have plans for other shows that are a little bit more wacky, a little bit more goofy, or just completely different. Because with starting this podcast, I've wanted to create more and more things. There are ideas that I've had that have been sitting on the back burner for years that I just didn't have the equipment to do, or I didn't have, the drive to do, or I didn't have the knowledge to do them. And now I do. And so I will say that within the next 6 months, there's going to be at least 2 projects that will come out in some form or another. One will be another podcast, which I'm very excited for that one. That's another project I'm working entirely on. Week 1, we spoke very briefly about a project that me and Z are working on. That project is something that we are working on and is something that we've discussed, but that is something that we want to find the identity for before it goes out. That'll be an entirely video production. There will be no audio version. That won't be a podcast. So that is something that is going to be a little bit more difficult to make and to produce. And so it's one of those things that we have to figure out really and truthfully what we want that to be before it goes out. And hopefully by that time, Joey Moments has grown a little bit into itself. Because right now it just feels like every week is a little different. And I hope that you've enjoyed that. But hopefully there's a little bit more stability going forward. And I don't want to keep dragging on and just, ramble. But I did want to put something out this week. I didn't want to just have it be no episode, and that was, for me, that was a perfect opportunity to talk to the audience themselves, to my friends who listen, to people I haven't spoken to in a very long time who have listened and who have reached out saying, I listened to the podcast. And it's been great that, I really am sharing these experiences with people maybe who wouldn't otherwise have heard these stories or have been able to see, the kind of relationships that maybe exist outside their circle. And it's been a very rewarding process 5 episodes in. So hopefully when we're 20 episodes in, it's more rewarding. And we're finding maybe our stride a little bit better than where we're at right now. Not to say that I don't like where we're at. I love the podcast the way it is. And so far it seems that the reception has been overly positive. With that, though, I am going to wrap up. It is going to be a much shorter episode than normal. And I did just want to put something out this week. If you want to follow us and see information about new things coming out or new episodes coming out for Joey Moments, or even sometimes we post, pictures from something that we talk about or videos that we talk about. Those get posted on the website at joeymoments.com, and our Twitter and our YouTube are both linked there as well. You can see all of Joey Moments or listen to all of Joey Moments directly from the website as well as see some additional shenanigans that we get into. I appreciate everyone for listening. And again, your support has been so amazing and has been so important to me. And thank you so much. I will see you guys next week with hopefully a regular episode of the Joey Moments podcast. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.